And I heard this quote, I'm attached to my children, I'm attached to my wife. If I'm non-attached, does that mean I have to not care about them? Which I thought was a really good question. And I remember a Lama at our centre was asked this question about children. And this person said, oh, I love my children. What's the difference between attachment and love? And the Lama was so clear. He said, attachment is wanting your happiness. Love is wanting the happiness of others. Very simple. In other words, if we are going to make our attachment a cause for other people feeling uncomfortable, then that's not love. And we need to step back and say, okay, how can I be a benefit to this person? This doesn't mean, and really until we're enlightened, we don't actually, or until we achieve aha level, we still have attachment. We just have to accept it. But we have to see how too much attachment starts to cause problems. How we start to recognise that being fully attached to others becomes a problem. I don't know if anyone's had a relationship where someone has attached themselves to you and won't let you out of their sight. And the thing that they want the most is you to become attached to them. And the thing that happens is you become less and less attached to them because of their attachment. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that the more attached you are to something, the more disappointed you're going to be, the more unhappy you're going to be. So we need to look at that kind of projection of holding on to something tightly and not letting it grow. And so this is an important thing within relationships. When we have a difficulty in a relationship, we want it to be a particular way. What we have to develop, and this is part of resilience, this ability to forgive and let go. There was a wonderful statement by an old couple. They were interviewed, and the old couple were asked, they'd been married for 60 years, and the old couple was asked, what's your secret to a long marriage? And they asked the husband, and he said, oh, compassion, love, understanding, forgiveness. And I thought, that's very nice. And then they asked the wife what her secret was. She said, a short memory. And so what she was really saying is, let it go. Just let it go. You know, maybe he didn't do the washing up that you asked him to do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And the things that we get the most upset about are actually quite trivial, particularly in relationships. It's the trivial things that cause the problem, not the big things. The big things we often deal with, but it's the trivial things. And that's the same in our lives. We kind of want things to constantly be okay. In samsara, nothing is 100%. I remember sitting with my teacher, Geshe Loden, and with another director, and we were talking about our centre, how things weren't going 100% right. We had difficulties. And he just sat back with a big smile and he went, you know, you're never going to get 100% perfect. It's just not going to happen. Be content with what's going to happen. And so this is this acceptance, this ability to accept, knowing the things you can change, which is what Shantideva said, and totally accepting the things you can't change. And again from my teacher, he used to say, if you go to the doctor and he says you have 1 week to live, 1 week, he said, what are you going to do? Worry about it? You know, that's it. He said, you patiently accept. And this is a really important thing in developing resilience, this ability to accept things that are not working well. And it causes you less grief. And in fact, this happened to a friend of mine many years ago who was given the diagnosis, terminal diagnosis of leukemia. And he'd been a really very diligent student of my teacher, Geshe Loden. And he told me, he said, when that doctor told him that, he said, I thought, okay, I have to patiently accept this. Now, what can I do to prolong the life? And what do I need to do in my practice? And he lasted another 7 years when the prognosis was about 12 months. So he let go the anguish of, my life's going to finish, oh, this is terrible, and he let it go. He actually detached himself from that, and he did an amazing practice. He had that together. When he was actually coming to a retreat, and I think this is an important story because it was certainly an eye-opener for me. We were doing a retreat in Melbourne, and this friend was going to come to the retreat, and then he said, oh no, I'm getting sick. This was at the end of his 7 years. He said, oh no, I'm not sick, but I'll just go to hospital for a little while and then I'll come out. And then the word came through was, I'm not coming out. I'm actually going to pass away. He said, it's all right. I've spoken to the nurses and I know exactly what's going to happen as I go through the death process. What's going to happen to my body. So he was fascinated by it. And then when my teacher went to see him, he said, oh, I'm getting the first indications that my body is starting to break down. He said, isn't that amazing? So instead of being freaked out by it, he was so well prepared in his practice. And then another friend, I didn't get to see him unfortunately, another friend went to see him, and he said to the friend, he said, look, it's lovely of you coming to see me, he said, but I've got a lot of work to do. He said, I'll catch you next time. So he's even talking about rebirth right there and then. Anyway, apparently the nurses said that he was on minimum painkillers and they had never seen anyone so completely positive about their death. So instead of turning it into a nightmare, he knew that he had a finite time and he capitalised on it. And this is again resilience, the perseverance. Instead of lying down and giving up, going, okay, I've got a job to do. And accordingly, during the retreat, Geshe Loden stood up and he said, oh, our friend has passed away. And he said, no problem. He said, high rebirth, maybe pure land rebirth, no problem. Don't worry about that. He's fine. And it was just a wonderful, he gave us all the teaching. Instead of being freaked out about the small things in life, here was this huge monumental experience of suffering that could have been for anybody, and he just turned it around, and turned it around very powerfully. And in fact, I heard, he said the people that went on the chemo with him that had leukemia at the same time as him, he survived the longest because he didn't beat himself up. He didn't go, oh, this is terrible. Why isn't it another way? He totally accepted it. So acceptance is one of the most important things we can do. And that then gives us the ability to adapt to change. And so we can bounce back, and that bouncing back then becomes perseverance. You know, if I say to myself, oh look, I can't meditate until I get the right cushion, or I'll meditate when I'm older, or I'll meditate when I've got the time, then what happens? All of a sudden you get to the end of your life and you go, oh, I wish I had meditated. So you don't want to die with regrets in terms of our practices. So this is important too. And so the practice builds our resilience, our ability to withstand difficulties and bounce back, come back and go, okay, what can I do? Not what I wish I could have done, but what can I do right now? And so again, this comes back to the idea of mindfulness, pulling it back to mindfulness constantly, being present. And then developing our meditations and developing our understanding and our compassion and our wisdom. Okay, so what else?